Hey folks, you're listening to episode 36 of the Deeply Devoted Podcast, a ministry of the E-Free Church of Bemidji, Minnesota. My name is Eric Nygren, and I'm one of the pastors on staff here at E-Free Bemidji. And folks, grab your peanuts and your Cracker Jack, because today on the podcast, I am chatting with our E-Free softball coach, Matt Myrick, and we're going to discuss the upcoming softball season. We'll also get to know Matt a little bit as he shares a bit of his faith story. And so I want to be sure to cover all the bases here. So let's go ahead and get started. Matt, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Pastor Eric.
All right, Matt, as we do on this podcast, when I bring on a guest here, the best way to get started is just to kind of get to know you a little bit. It's a big church, and not everybody knows who Matt Myrick is. So I wondered if you would just sort of introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell us a little bit like where you're from, what brought you to Bemidji, how long you've been a part of our church family.
Yeah, no, that's great. So I grew up in Warroad, Minnesota, which is about 2.5 hours north of here on the border, and went to college for undergrad at Bemidji State. And so I won't tell you what year because it'll date me a bit. But then I got married, and my wife Shelby and I ended up staying in the Bemidji area and calling this home. And we've been attending E-Free since 2013, so it's been a minute.
Okay. Yeah, and I know you've been involved in all kinds of things here at this church, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those things, but it's been good to get to know you in the time that I've been here. Our paths have crossed on a number of things. Just even recently, you and your wife were teaching a youth Sunday school class on teen finances. Matt, tell us a little bit, how'd that go? And what made you want to teach a Sunday school class to teenagers on finances?
Good question. I guess you'll have to ask the students how they thought it went. But from my perspective, we had a lot of fun with it. It was really encouraging and fun to see just how bright and capable the youth are here in the church. And so that's really exciting. And they're all very gifted. And so it was a good group. Yeah, and I have an education background. Prior to working as a financial advisor, I was in higher ed and considered a path in as an instructor, and so it wasn't way out of my interest or comfort level to integrate my job field with the Bible, and to do that hopefully in a way that was applicable for the teens. And so so thankfully I had some prior experience to lean back on a little bit. But yeah, it was a great time.
Good. So those teenagers didn't intimidate you. You were comfortable in that setting, and
well, it's funny because so Shelby, we did it together, and she said, I think it was like the second or third week, and she said, "It's like, boy, today went really, really well," and and I was like, "Oh, like tell me more about that. Like, what do you mean? What part of it it went over well?" And she said, "Well, I think that you stopped trying to entertain everybody and just really taught the content." So I think there probably was a little bit of you getting acclimated and all that. So it was good.
Yeah, it's funny, especially we're blessed with a number of teens, a great middle school, high school youth group. They know when you're authentic and when you're not authentic, and when you're trying to be someone you're not, or trying to be extra cool or something like that. Just be yourself in it. Yeah.
Right.
Well, so this was a class on finances, but I'm assuming, Matt, that you taught some principles that weren't just applicable to middle school and high school students. Anything from that class that you would say, boy, this was the one thing I would take away that I wish the whole church would know from this class?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I like to think we covered a lot of good topics. But if I had to pick a couple, I'd say that the first one is that generosity is important for the giver in addition to the recipient, right? That God uses generosity to be a blessing to those receiving it, but also it's so important for the heart condition of the person that is making that gift. And so I think that's one key thing. Second thing is that having and following a financial plan of sorts, including budgeting and having goals, I think is a matter of stewardship. And I think that sometimes in the faith community, it's easy to see that as an unspiritual topic. And I actually think the Bible has a lot to say otherwise.
Yeah, quite a bit. And in fact, in the past, you've taught our financial peace courses here. It's been a minute since we've done one, but I'm sure we could do another one here at some point if you're willing to lead that again, or if folks were interested in just kind of brushing up on some of those financial principles. So, yeah, Matt, you're kind of a man of many talents here. You're teaching youth Sunday school, and we want to talk a little bit about softball. Finally, the weather's kind of warming up. Even as I'm looking at the forecast here, it's going to be pretty nice even this weekend. So softball season's on the horizon. I think, aren't you even moving out to our softball field here pretty soon?
Yeah, that's right. And so we started practices initially in the gym, and the church has been gracious enough to do that. And then, but actually we have had an outdoor practice on the E-Free field, and we're hoping to have another couple if we can before the season starts on May 15th.
Okay, that's coming up here.
It is.
All right. So Matt, as you're looking forward to opening day, May 15th, what are you looking forward to as this new season here of softball gets underway?
Yeah. So, it's an exciting season. Every year is fun. You always have, kind of continuity from people that have been in the program for years, but then there's always some new faces, and that's really exciting. Yeah. Foundationally, church softball is about fellowship and discipleship first. Winning in competitiveness second, right? Mm-hmm. So, it's important to be able to establish that team culture that, hey, this is what we're about. This is why we're here. Yeah. Here are the ground rules. So, so I think that, it's been really neat to see how especially the guys have been playing for a handful of years now, really have embraced this team culture. Yeah. And so there's a lot of leadership that happens completely outside of anything I say or do. And so that's just really cool to see that. And also it's exciting because when the new people come, they can just feel that culture, and it requires less explanation for me all the time, even though it's, we're still gonna have conversations about attitudes and things like that. Right, but it's just a really great program, and I'm lucky to be part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing quite like being part of a team, whether it's a athletic team or a ministry team or something like that you, just working together toward a common goal, and serving together, playing together. Yeah, those are they build relationships really quick, build really good rapport here. So now, May 15th start. Is that the start of the actual games here?
That's right.
In town? Okay.
Yep. That's when the season kicks off with the games. Yep.
Okay. So we're gonna hopefully we'll have the schedule here pretty soon. The last couple of years, we've been putting that schedule in our bulletin. In fact, even recently, this year and last year, we've been selling the T-shirts to get kind of team spirit going here. Those are still available. And so we're going to encourage our church family to go and support our E-Free softball team. Matt, maybe for those that haven't been a part of this in the past, can you give us some of the, when and where can folks catch a game? What are usually the times? And maybe even you got any more room on the squad for anyone else that might say, I want to do that.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's the games are held on Thursday evenings. The games will start at 6:30, and there can be multiple times, whether it's 6:30 and 7:30 or 8:30, and so that's something that's always in flux. That is posted in the bulletin. Thankfully, Jessica does a great job with that. So it's but the games are located at the City League fields behind the curling club. And so that's where they're located. It's just kind of behind Perkins there. So it's great because, you've got 10 plus teams and all of their friends and family that are coming to support them. So you've got this, this grander body of believers to the tune of maybe 300 to 500 people per night out there fellowshipping and having fun. And it's a great time.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been out a couple of times, and it's really neat it's a great environment to just come and watch a game on a summer evening. Now, we've not yet hired a trainer for the team, a medical staff or anything, right? It's funny because I see some of our players usually the next day. I think about last year or so, Pastor Douglas, when he'd hobble in after a game or things like that. So it's not going to be an injury-free season. Hopefully not something too critical there. But yeah, so you got more room for other players there if we want to send some folks your way?
Definitely. Yeah, we definitely have an open door policy. And so, yeah, definitely if there's somebody that's interested in joining, do reach out. We'd be glad to talk with you. And it's a great time.
Okay. Yeah. At varying experience levels, maybe too.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, there's some players that have been, whether competitive baseball or what have you for 15, 20 years of experience. And there's some people that are just brand new to this, but are wanting to be part of something, and all skill levels are welcome, and we'll have a great time.
Yeah. I didn't play a softball or baseball as a student back in the day. I did when I was a kid, started in T-ball and worked my way up. But I was always the kid that played, was stuck in right field and batted at the bottom of the batting order. So, everybody can play, I guess, at all skill level there. So
Right.
I don't know if I'll come out. I'll be an observer and I'll wear my T-shirt and participate there. But Matt, you alluded to earlier just that this isn't just a church softball league to play ball. It really is a ministry opportunity, even a discipleship opportunity. I'm kind of curious, Matt. Maybe just over the years that you've been involved, how have you seen that work out? How have you maybe some examples of ways that you've seen the team grow in discipleship or be ministered to through gathering together as the softball team?
Yeah, it's an amazing opportunity for connection and fellowship and discipleship and all the above. And I'll give you a few illustrations or examples. Yeah. So for me personally, when we moved here in 2013, and I think I started playing maybe in 2014, I think was the first year I started playing. Well, looking back, most of the friendships that I've made through the church did come from my connection to softball.
Okay.
So just attending on Sunday was not enough to really establish meaningful, deep relationships. But I can look back on a handful of people that I didn't know prior that I'm now close to, and a lot of those connections really did come from softball.
Yeah.
So even in my own experience, I can see that. Now, as far as the outreach portion or the other ways, I can see two very specific situations that tend to happen that's just so exciting. One is, you've got guys who are a part of it that buy into it, and then they invite their friends that they know from work, for example, that that they're seeking, they're interested, but they're just not really getting plugged into church. They say, well, come out and play softball with us. It's fun. It's you like playing sports, and and so they come into this kind of less threatening, less it feels like it's I know that there's going to be God talked about here, but it's just a little easier to digest for some people who are at that place. And so they'll come in, and it's so fun to see them come in, and by the end of the year, sharing prayer requests and really participating in the devotional side of softball. And that just warms my heart. And then, and then oftentimes you'll see them start coming with their families to church, and it's just so cool. So that's one part of that. The other group that I can identify is people who, they've been part of the church, but their lives have really changed since maybe getting married and having kids. And, so their involvement and their opportunities rub shoulders with other guys or other people in their age group is really changed. And so what happens is, they've kind of found themselves disconnected or just a little bit kind of floundering with their life. Well, then having all of a sudden this camaraderie from softball leads to these relationships that can extend into small group or other types of things for the off season. And I can see a change there too. And so both of those scenarios are just really, I can identify them and praise God for.
Yeah. It's a great example of just, I think about all these opportunities we have in our church that I would sort of call, for lack of a better term, kind of backdoor ministries, because there's all kinds of people that say, well, maybe I'm not quite ready for Sunday worship, or if you invited me to a Bible study, that's a little intimidating, but softball I can do, or come to a meal I can do, or a men's breakfast or a women's event or something like that that's a little more social and relational. And then as you build those relationships, whether the end of that is come to church or just, as you said, that's a huge step to go from spiritually curious to even opening up to share prayer requests. It might not seem like much to us if we've been walking with the Lord for a long time, But for somebody that's just maybe starting out and trying to find their way on their faith, that's just a tremendous opportunity there. So
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to shift gears here just a little bit, Matt, moving from softball to get to know you just a little bit more. This podcast has been a really neat platform for us to every once in a while do these, what we kind of call Testimony Tuesdays. If I were to ask you to come and share your testimony on a Sunday morning, I might give you 4 minutes, 5 minutes, and not because we don't want to hear your story, but we've only got so much time. But this platform really gives us an opportunity to sort of get a little more of the details here and really get to know people. And it's been neat to get some feedback from others to say, I knew this person was in my church, but I never really knew their story. So that's kind of the goal here. But often we call this our testimony. Before I get into the specifics there of your particular story, Matt, when you hear that word testimony, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's typically going to be a story about somebody's, the events that led up to their commitment of faith, and then maybe some of the things that changed or happened afterwards. So it's usually kind of this like context around their decision to follow Jesus, or that's typically what I would think of when I think of the word testimony.
Yeah, it can be a little bit of a churchy word, but that's a great way to explain that. So let's do that. Let's just even start at the beginning here, Matt. Each of us, if we're going to tell our story, share our testimony, obviously it all starts at a different point. We each have a different beginning. Matt, when do you think the Lord really started to pursue you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm trying to think about how to explain it because like some, I grew up in a Christian home. Mm-hmm. I did make a faith commitment at a really young age. Mm-hmm. Was baptized, by the time I was maybe 6, give or take. Yeah. And so, so it wasn't like I was journeying through life as an adult, kind of doing my own thing. And then all of a sudden, the Lord came knocking on my door, and then I can, describe and articulate this big life transition because I kind of started there. So I think in a way, like, if I were to answer the specific phrasing of the question, when did the Lord start pursuing you? I think He maybe even started pursuing me from before I was born. He just putting me in this in a family where the love of Jesus was proclaimed and an environment to go to church and be part of that. So. So I guess that's how I could best answer the question.
Yeah, it's tough because you're right. I mean, some people in their story, they can say, "Boy, I remember the day, I remember the temperature, I remember the events surrounding it." And then others of us, depending on whether, where that is in our timeline, it's really hard to know. And maybe at age, whatever, 4, 5, 6 or something, just even your awareness of the Lord pursuing you, having the blessing of growing up in a Christian home, just of, this is all I've ever known. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But along those same lines, some people's lives look very different before they come to faith in Christ compared to after. And, with that, often other people just don't have that dramatic contrast of how they came to faith, especially if they came to an early age. But Matt, just over time, how would you describe, who you were before you first heard and understood the gospel and where you are now? So even just as if you can remember back that far, just kind of when the gospel even started to take hold a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think the best way to answer that is as I got to the age of closer to around 10, 11 years old, I think that my deeper understanding of what that meant to know who Jesus is and to follow him and to kind of grapple with that faith walk, and even getting to the age where you start having friends or you're part of sports teams and you can really see a difference of attitudes and perspectives, and it could kind of contrast this journey that I was on compared to others and my peers. Yeah. And I think that's when that really became more clear to me that okay, this isn't, not everybody is doing this, and that there is there's a difference, there's a choice that is made here, and then there's a big implication. So
Yeah, it is an interesting thing, especially if you grow up in a Christian environment and you're kind of processing through that at a young age. But I did not grow up in a believing home, but I've got to kind of watch this through the eyes of my own kids. And I remember, in particular, a time when it dawned on them that their school friends, not all of them went to church. And it just sort of blew their mind because that's all they ever knew. And yeah, you're probably right. Maybe, around 10 to 12, kind of that early age of just, oh, okay, not everybody knows what I know. Not everybody believes what I believe. And okay, now there's some implications for my life. So even as a very young person, we can kind of think through those things. And then just even as you look over your timeline of your life, Matt, whenever I talk to people about their story, their testimony, so many times people will describe either significant people or events that really kind of stand as milestones in that faith journey. For some, it is that real turning point. But for others, it's just sort of moving them forward along that timeline. Matt, as you sort of look back on your testimony timeline, are there specific people or specific events that really kind of mark that way for you?
Yeah, I can definitely name a handful of milestones or events that were really defining moments, if you will. Yeah. And a couple of them happened in my teenage era. One was there was a guy who held youth group for young men, and he didn't even go to our church, and this wasn't a per se church small group, but it was something that everybody was invited to, in the community. And in no way is this a knock against my own church youth group, which was great, and they did a great job too. But his name was Dave Wilmo, and he just took a different approach to discipling that age group. He was a bachelor. He was very intentional to do fun events like Boundary Waters trips and other things that really got guys out of their element. He challenged them in ways that just maybe wasn't easy to do in a co-ed youth group setting. Right. It just was different. Yeah. And it's what really would show to his impact is that, even I'm call it 20 years removed from that when I first would have been going to his youth group and or close to that. And he to this day makes a point to go hunting with me on a kind of routine weekend we have and just hearing his stories and what's going on in his life. I mean, he's still in touch with dozens and dozens of these kids who are now in their 30s and 40s and is involved in their lives and praying for them and talking to them and helping them navigate things. And so it was just somebody who was really, really, I hate to use the word intentional, but it really intentional in a really unique way. And so that was somebody who was impactful. Another thing was Randy Alcorn wrote a book called The Purity Principle, and that really was meaningful for moral struggles I was having in my high school time frame. And that's something that was something that had a big impact in my life and really challenged me. And probably for the first time, it was reading a book that really addressed a challenge in my life that was meaningful and something that I went and gave copies to other people. And so it was like my first time where I really, I, in a very pragmatic way, saw the impact God using a book outside of the Bible that that a friend handed me. I was mind blown. It changed my life, and I just couldn't help but. And my dad actually helped me buy copies to give to my friends and so forth. So that was something that was really impactful. And I think I mentioned this at the men's prayer breakfast, but I was at a conference in February, and I knew that Randy Alcorn was a speaker there, but there's thousands of people, and so. But I happened to be coming back from a session, and here he's walking alongside me on the way he had a Starbucks coffee, and I just kind of struck up conversation and just mentioned that the impact that book had in my life, and he just and I mentioned that hey here's where I'm at now, and I don't think that if God hadn't used that book that really could look different, and so I just want to thank you for that. And he just oh wow, that's like, thanks for sharing that, and it's so cool that you were here because I'm really not supposed to be over here right now, but I wanted coffee, so I'm really glad that this worked out to talk. So anyways, that was a special moment.
That's neat, just the way both of those stories, the way God uses people and events and things in our lives to kind of shape our spiritual journey, if you want to call it that. People that we know and have relationship with, and other than a random encounter with the author, people that have an impact on our life that are authors or speakers or people we'll never meet this side of heaven, but how God uses all of that to shape us. And I think that's one of the powerful reasons for believers to think through their testimony is they do stop and they think, okay, that book or that conference or that mentor, I can really just plot it on a timeline, and not just when it was, but I can almost graph out how my faith jumped up or was strengthened, or I brought back to the faith or something like that. And so I'd encourage those that are listening to include those sort of milestone, I'll call them milestone events or people in your story. It's so significant there. One of the other things I often say, Matt, is that whether we realize it or not, our testimony is our personal story. When you tell your story, it's your story. It's about you. My story is about me. But I always try to emphasize that in our stories, God is the main character of the story. Because ultimately, it wasn't about what you did or what I did. It's about what God has done in our lives. So, Matt, I'm curious, just how has God worked in your life to bring you to where you are now in your faith? So as you kind of look back now and you say, I can see the hand of God this way.
Yeah, I think that God has been extremely gracious and patient with me. Even thinking back on the kind of stable home life and family environment I grew up with, and yet still decided to make bad choices at different times and struggled in different ways. And so I think of specific events like the ones I mentioned. Think of a couple of defining moments I shared at the men's prayer breakfast about even recognizing recently just the ease of complacency in your life when especially in when seasons are going pretty well. It's easy to become complacent and to kind of thanks God for all these nice things or whatever, and to kind of lose that zeal and fervor and losing sight of why you're here, and it really changes your prayer life. So I've been very convicted about that, and I just think that God's been just very, like I said, very patient, very gracious with me as I've been coming along in this journey. It gives me a lot of gratitude and makes me feel very humble.
Yeah. Good to reflect back and to think forward that maybe God's not finished with us yet. Yeah. Matt, have you had many opportunities elsewhere? Well, you mentioned at the men's breakfast here of sharing your testimony. Have you had many opportunities other than that to share your story, either in a public setting or even on a one-on-one conversation with anyone?
Yeah. So probably quite a few times, maybe even, I shouldn't say more opportunities, but it really stands out to me, my opportunities to share in more of a public setting. I think just by nature of a prior job I had, part of that was traveling and doing devotionals at youth groups and the such. And so I think that there has been numerous opportunities to share in a more of a public platform, but of course some one-on-one as well.
Yeah.
In a weird way, I might say that I probably would feel more immediately comfortable sharing in a public setting than I would one-on-one.
Yeah.
And for reasons maybe we can get into, but I would say that might even be more just, organically comfortable for me.
I'd probably say the same. I'm super comfortable in front of a big group. But you hear people share these stories about, well, I was sitting next to this person on an airplane and one thing led to another, and we were in a deep spiritual conversation. I hope that I would be that person, but I don't know that I'm naturally wired that way. And sometimes even I found with somebody that I have a relationship with that's a non-believer, I find that even harder sometimes because I'm thinking, boy, it sounds weird to say this, but I I don't want what I'm about to share with them to negatively impact this relationship. I want this relationship to go on. I, of course, want to share the gospel with them. But I realize once I let this cat out of the bag, it might change the relationship there. So, yeah.
Right. No, well said. And I was just thinking about some maybe lessons I've learned perhaps the hard way about sharing your faith, and certainly not the expert, and you're about to decipher that for yourself. But the first one is that I think a lie that perhaps Satan tells you is that you don't know enough to share your faith. Right. And to your point, there's kind of that fear that, well, what happens if I don't explain something well, or that they ask a question that I don't know how to answer? Then will I have not just turned them away from the faith? And I think that in some cases that it's easy to even use that as an excuse because it's uncomfortable to put yourself out there. Right. And so, it's being discerning. And I would certainly advocate that for people to be in the Word and be a student of the Word and to know the reason why you believe these things. So absolutely. But also, that I think it does take a degree of boldness to put yourself out there. And, and I think that that's something that you just have to be willing to take a step. And then maybe the second thing is that I found that people tend to be quite accepting when you're vulnerable instead of being judgmental, as you might imagine. Yes. If they sense that you're being genuine and authentic, then I think that people tend to, they tend to be accepting of what you're saying. Right. And they can see that coming through. And so I think if, that's something that people like, well, I don't want to share, I don't want to air my dirty laundry because how could they respect me if they knew, or, that kind of thing. Right. And I just haven't found that to really be the case in application. And of course, discretion and don't cast pearls before swine and all the things, but I just haven't really found that to be the case. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes me think of just the story you told about, this book that sort of changed your life. What did you do next? You said, I've got to share this with other people. And, that's a very different attitude than saying, to come in and say, you better read this or else you're in trouble, versus this really had an impact on me and I would love to share this with you. Can I give this to you? Can I tell you about this? Yeah, you're right. There's a big difference there, that vulnerability there. And just, we're not experts in everything, and being humble and being able to say, yeah, that's a great question. I don't know I know that answer, or I'm still wrestling with that in my own faith of trying to figure that out. So good. Any other advice you'd give to would-be evangelists here, Matt, or at least sharing your story? Yeah.
That's great. One other thought is there's a book that actually we're going through. My work colleagues and I, our team is going through, and it's a book called Looking for the One by David McIver. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of that. Okay.
And if I were to summarize it with like a few core themes, it's focusing on everyday evangelism, listening to the Holy Spirit, and then being able to experience these transformative encounters that David McIver walks people through, and to help them be more attuned with sharing your faith and looking for those opportunities and going for them. And so that's something that we're actually doing at work. Yeah. And that's something that I would recommend people would consider.
Okay. So just even in that environment, all together in the same group, trying to figure it out, how do we do this? Do you foresee yourselves as a group kind of saying, okay, let's go do this? How did it go? Some of that maybe accountability or challenging one another to actually put it into practice. Is that maybe the next step after the book?
Yeah, totally. And part of it's the company I work for. It's a financial planning practice, but it's also it's an overtly faith and Christ-centered organization. Mm-hmm. And so we want everybody on the team to be willing and ready to pray with a client situation, and then something we do as a team on a weekly basis is we bring all these conversations we're having, we bring them together in corporate prayer. We pray through a prayer list of what's going on in our clients' lives, and so it's just a tool to help us be more equipped to do that well.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah. So lots of great stuff here as we think through this topic of testimony. Matt, thanks for sharing a little bit about your own faith journey. And as we get to know you, we just see how God has shaped your life, and God has made you the man He wants you to be. And now, as a husband and a father, and you're kind of replicating these things for your own kids, and think about, just as you're talking about, what a blessing it is to grow up in a Christian household. So now you get to be the next generation of that for your kids and disciple them toward the Lord. So yeah, thanks for sharing some of that, Matt. One of the last things I like to do on this podcast at the end of every episode, I like to ask our guests one last question. It may or may not be directly related to what we've been talking about here. But here at our church, at E-Free Bemidji, we talk about becoming deeply devoted followers of Jesus together. And so, Matt, I want to ask you, what's one thing that you have been blessed by lately that is deepening your devotion to Jesus?
I think it circles back to something I mentioned, that it's the awareness of how easy it is to become complacent. And especially in an American church where, we live in one of the wealthiest generations and access to things. Yeah. And so it's easy to be very comfort driven. And that's just, even more so than just about any other civilization in the history of the world. Yeah. And so it's, that temptation for complacency, it just has really been sticking in my mind, and I've been very convicted about it. And so, yeah, I would say that, I've been blessed by the awareness of that problem, that I can see that even creeping into my own life, and making the conscious decision to repent of it, and ask, hey, God, what would you have me do? Instead of, hey, thanks for that other thing, and thanks for that thing. And, it's good to be thankful, but the point is that it really changes your prayer life when you're not complacent.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting, because maybe we wouldn't think of complacency as a picture of wickedness. And so when we sort of do some inward reflection and we're saying, Lord, just show me where my sin is. When that comes up, and we think, oh, okay, that's what you're showing me, Lord. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe that's a word that's not well understood. Maybe I should have elaborated, but it's just this. It's this kind of this docile component of your heart that you're not. It's easy to not be pursuing the things of God, but to just kind of be taking a back seat and flat-footed. Yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, thanks for sharing that, Matt. And this has been fun. Maybe we'll have to have you back on another one, and we'll talk a little bit maybe more about finances or something that you're into. But as we wrap up here, Matt, I know we expect the softball team to finish first. I mean, that's our expectation. But can you give us a prediction for the season, Matt? You want to give us what our final record is going to be, where we're going to finish in the playoffs and all that?
You know what? I was going to try to say something snide about, well, you have to come out and see.
There you go. That's fair.
But I track more of the growth that happens in the team, and I just really have high expectations for all the things that I think God's going to do through the lives of the people that are part of it. So
awesome. Yeah, it's going to be a fun season, and I'm glad that the summer might be almost here. At least spring is here, and then we'll get into summer. So, well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Deeply Devoted podcast. Folks, don't forget that you can send in your comments, questions, feedback, or topic suggestions by sending us an email. You can send that to podcast@efcbemidji.org. My thanks to Matt Myrick for joining me today, and we'll be back next Tuesday with another episode. But until then, have a great week, and thanks for listening.